Welcome to Ogles channel, thanks for watching today. Let's continue our journey through every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game, and today we're going to focus on a game called Gargoyles Quest. Now, I never had this particular game growing up, but I had like all the games surrounding this game. And what I mean by that is I actually had Ghosts and Goblins on NES, which Gargoyles Quest is a spin-off of that game. I had Gargoyles Quest 2 on the NES, which of course is the sequel to this particular game. I had Demon's Crest on the SNES, which is also a sequel to Gargoyles Quest. And so it's like I had all the games surrounding this one, but I never had the original Gargoyles Quest. So it's about time I finally played through the very first one in the series. Now, this game actually got moved up in the queue as far as like which games I covered first, as I journeyed through all these Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, because Retro Ed UK commented on one of the earlier videos, said Gargoyles Quest was one of his all-time favorite games, wanted to see it covered sooner than later, so naturally, we moved it way up in the queue, and we're covering it today. And if there's a game that you would like to see covered sooner than later, let me know the name of that game in the comments down below, and just like Gargoyles Quest, I'll move it to the front of the queue as well. But also, if you haven't checked out Retro Ed UK's channel, it's a great channel to go to as far as like retro game collecting, retro action figures, all things retro, and it's just a really cool channel. I always look forward to new uploads, so give it a watch as well. But let's go ahead and jump into Gargoyles Quest. Now, I always like to start these videos off by looking at the box art for the game first, and as I look at the box art for Gargoyles Quest, it's a little more wacky than I'd expected it to be, because this game is a very, I don't know if it's a serious game, but it's sort of a darker game. If you look at the box arts for like Gargoyles Quest 2 and Demon's Crest, those are very dark covers that fit the tone of the game, and this one just feels sort of on the wacky side. Of course, you have Firebrand right there in the middle in the center, and that's your main protagonist here. You are Firebrand, you are that gargoyle, and he's always portrayed as red, even in the game Ghosts and Goblins and all the sequels, so it's sort of weird that he's green on the screen. He never wears that little vest like that. You know, it really doesn't look a whole lot like him except for the overall shape of his body. But there's a lot of differences. Even his in-game character doesn't look so much like this. It definitely looks more along the lines of what he is in Gargoyles Quest 2, Ghosts and Goblins, and in Demon's Crest. This is definitely more of a, I don't know, polished up version of Firebrand. And of course, down below you have some of the core enemies in the game here. You got the little ghost down there, the ghoul, and it looks more like Patrick from SpongeBob on this particular image. In the game, they look definitely more like ghouls. And of course, you got one of the little demon frogs as well, which are naturally in the game. You got a little castle in the background. Overall, I mean, it's a fine cover. It just simply doesn't represent the game to me as far as like tonally, as well as some of the other Gargoyles Quest have done in the future. Now, when you load a game up here, you're tossed immediately into the storyline of the game, and the story is pretty simple. It's about a group of destroyers are attacking the Ghoul Realm, and that's Firebrand's hometown, so naturally he has to return to the Ghoul Realm to help defend it against these destroyers, push them out, and get rid of the King of Destruction as well. It's a pretty basic story, but I do enjoy seeing the opposing side of who Firebrand usually is in the Ghost and Goblin game, and actually see him, you know, go back to his hometown and be the hero of the game. I mean, it's an interesting take as far as that goes. Now, when we officially start the game up here, we have a little overhead scene of Firebrand in the middle and some messengers come to him and basically reinforce the opening story saying we need to return to the Ghoul Realm. And you're going to think to yourself, is this an overhead game like an RPG? And it's sort of kind of for like 10 to 15% of the game, because probably 5% of the game is done like in a little overhead view like this, where Firebrand moves around, talks to people, checks things, you know, uses items and such as that, but there's no attack involved. And then of course you have an overhead map screen, which is probably 10% of the game, where you travel from region to region and get sucked into little bitty battles. And so for that part, it does feel like a RPG a little bit, but like 85% of the game is not like that. 85% of the game is a 2D fighter, and that's the core bit of the game. And so immediately after you leave this first room of the overhead, you're going to be tossed into the 2D part of the game. And like I said, this is where the vast majority of the game is going to take place. And you play as Firebrand, you have all the basic powers of the little gargoyle here. You can of course hop into the air, and you can press the hover button, and you just simply hover there until your wing power runs out. Of course, you have an attack button where you can shoot a little fireball at enemies. And throughout the game, you're going to get upgrades as far as like different, you know, fireballs you can shoot out. Some that can break rocks, some that can make little sticky things on spikes for you to climb up. You do get more wing power as far as like the further you can glide throughout the game. You get more jump power, so you can jump higher to reach different platforms. And there's a lot of little upgrades you're going to get, and also some more life meters as well. You're not stuck with two little life meters throughout the entire game. But from the very get-go here, you're going to notice that you have a great deal of control over your character. It's not going to be like in Ghosts and Goblins, where like when you dedicate to a jump, you know, you're jumping like sort of at an angle, and you can't sort of move in the air. And Ghosts and Goblins is a horribly controlling game, for me anyway. But this game, you feel like you have complete control over your character, because when you jump in the air, you can push the jump button again at any point, and that's where you're going to hover, and you can sort of move left and right until your wing power runs out. Of course, you know, you can aim extremely well with your attack button. I mean, it's just a very well controlled game. And I love games where you actually feel like you're in complete control of your character, and when a mistake happens, you know it's on you, and not just because the game had poor mechanics. And it's not that the game just feels great control-wise, the game looks great as well, because your sprite, a firebrand, very vivid. You can always tell exactly what animation he's doing. All the enemies you're going to come across, whether it's like the fish jumping out of the river, or the little ghouls walking around, or the spiders, or the little fire people. I mean, they all look phenomenal. The foreground, the background is extremely well decorated. I mean, the game definitely has a aesthetic to it, and they really worked hard to make sure this game looked wonderful. To me, it looks better than Ghosts and Goblins, and it definitely puts forth a great atmosphere or feel for the ghoul realm that you're fighting through. And also the music in this level is what I consider a great soundtrack, because what it does, it takes the instrumentation from Ghosts and Goblins and some of the progression from Ghosts and Goblins and remixes all of that to make a completely original song that as you're listening to it, it's like you can hear the Ghosts and Goblins influence, but it's also its own song, and it sounds phenomenal in this game. And so I love that they're taking the sort of the inspiration of the core game and mixing it up to let you know that, hey, this is a completely unique game, but still has some of that harkening back to where it came from. And I just love that. Now, as you're traveling throughout the level, like I said, you're going to encounter a bunch of different enemies as far as like ghouls and bats and little fire people here. But there is going to be one thing that I have a little bit of trouble with in the game, and that's, of course, when you glide across with your wingspan here, you hit onto a wall, and you can, of course, jump up the wall because, you know, you can attach to it with your claws. But if you're too close to the spikes, I wish you could sort of drop off the wall and then continue flying from there. But you always have to jump off the wall, which means when you jump, you go up and you're going to hit some spikes sometimes. It's not a huge deal, but as you go throughout the game, that's going to get a little bit annoying. And maybe there is a way to fall off the wall, and I just never realized it. So if there is, not a complaint on the game, it's just probably poor playing. But if there's not a way, I wish the game did work that in where you just drop off the wall. But eventually you're going to get to the final boss of the first level, and holy cow, it is a great looking final boss. It's this demon fish that's going to rise out of the water, and it is very slow, so you're going to have plenty of opportunity to attack it. It's going to slowly journey to you. You have to hop from one platform to the other to get to the other side and wait for him to go back down into the water, come back out again, get some more shots in. It's a very easy boss fight, but at the same time, it's such a cool looking boss fight because the graphics or the sprite for this giant fish, it's very vivid, it's very haunting, and it just sets the aesthetic for the game perfectly. As we go throughout this video, you're going to notice like all of the bosses in this game are just phenomenal bosses and some of the best boss fights that I've played on the Game Boy. Now, after you defeat the giant fish, you're officially in the ghoul realm here, and you're going to notice that this is going to be an even more further removed overhead view, because it's like the map screen that you're going to be going on. And it's like in the Adventures of Link, you have the overhead map where you journey along and you get sucked into individual battles. And so as you're journeying through here, you're going to notice little ghouls standing off to the side, and you can talk to them, and you're going to get sucked into a battle, and if you defeat them, that pathway opens up. And so this is how you're going to journey through the overworld here. And like I said, sometimes you get sucked into the random battles, and every random battle that you go into, or every time you battle one of these little ghosts that you talk to, at that point you're going to get some vials for your winning. If you save up your vials in some of the towns, you can exchange those vials for extra lives. So there's actually some incentive to always win these battles and actually, you know, talk to as many ghouls as you can, because that means more extra lives down the road. But the aesthetics here for the overworld are once again phenomenal, because of course you have all the little haunting stuff throughout the environment, like the dead trees and such, you know, little demon palaces you're going to come upon, little demon holes you can get in, but also the atmosphere music in the background. It's a very haunting little song, but at the same time it has a sadness about it. It's a great song. Just listen to a little bit of a clip of it here as you're journeying through the overworld. I have to say, this game truly does have a phenomenal soundtrack. And from here you're going to journey into your first town, and all the towns are going to function in a pretty similar way here. There's going to be one fellow who's going to give you a password system, one fellow who's going to sell you Talisman of the Cyclone, which is like extra lives. There's going to be one fella who sort of advances the storyline a little bit, and then just a bunch of other little villagers who just sort of say meaningless things. But that's going to be pretty much all the town setups as you go. Now in this particular town, of course, you know, I'm going to buy a couple Talisman of the Cyclones, I'm going to get my password, but also there's a fellow named Jark here, if I'm saying it right. And Jark is basically, you know, a higher up demon who's lost his gremlin stick, and says if you get his gremlin stick back, he's going to give us a candle to help us to navigate further into the overworld. So naturally we take upon us to find his gremlin stick, and he also gives us the fingernail of the Spectre, which allows us to jump a little bit higher so we can reach more platforms to sort of grab onto. Basically maneuver our 2D levels a little bit easier, and so we journey on our way to find the gremlin stick. So we're back in the overworld here, and we're looking for where's this gremlin stick going to be. We journey around a little bit, and we find this little tower over here. Looks like a tower of the jack-o'-lantern is what I'm going to call it, because look at the little face on it there. We journey into the tower here, and we're back into 2D once again. As you fight through it, there are going to be different enemies in this part. You're going to have like little flies that are going to try to attack you. These little exploding cherry trees, what I'm going to call them, that shoot out little cherries when you blow them up. You have like those little Venus flytraps that shoot out little eyeball monsters at you. It's a really cool aesthetic as far as like different enemies, and I like that there's different enemies throughout the game. A lot of games just simply recycle the same enemies throughout, but so many of these different levels have different enemies to go along with it. I'm not saying everything's, completely original in every single level, but every level does bring in at least some new enemies. Now also you have these little urns here that are going to rotate back and forth. They may not be urns, but they look like urns to me. And of course you grab onto the side of those and you sort of, like a little puzzle platform here, figure out which side you need to grab onto it to jump to the next one, and you navigate yourself all the way to the top of this little jack-o'-lantern tower. And once again, when we get to the top of the tower, we have an awesome little boss fight here because we have these little blobs that have attached themselves to these walls here. And your job is basically to attack and destroy all 4 of the blobs, but each of the blobs can be shooting little projectiles at you. You have to maneuver your way around, hopping on different walls, timing it just right as far as like, your wingspan, shoot your little fire move at them, and basically blow up and destroy all 4 of the little blobs in order to win the battle. Now when you win the battle, you do get a new move as far as like a blockbuster, and that's going to allow you to shoot a different type of fire breath out that's a little bit faster, can actually destroy some blocks in front of you, but also you're going to get the gremlin stick, so now we get to head back to Jark and return his gremlin stick. So when we get to Jark, of course I talk to him and he says he owes me his happiness, and nothing happens. And I think to myself like, did I miss something in the game? Is that all I get for returning the gremlin stick? Is just a congratulatory? But if you actually go up to him, instead of pressing the talk button, press the use button, at that point he actually, of course, hands over the candle to Poltergeist, which he says to take to Darkone, and also allows you the ability to jump a little bit higher. So now our new mission is to take this candle to Dracone. And you're going to notice throughout the game, it's going to be very much of a step-by-step. You're going to get an item, they're going to tell you who to take it to. He's going to give you an item, they're going to tell you to take it to. And they're going to give you an item, and they're going to tell you to take it to. The game is pretty linear like this. I mean, there are a few parts where you can sort of branch out in the overworld, choose your own path, get into different battles and whatnot. But for the vast majority of the game, it's going to be, going to give an item and tell you to take it to, and you just sort of journey through and find your way around. The overworld is not as expansive as one might expect, but it still offers a little break from just simply the 2D action. But regardless, I continue on my path here. I talk to a little zombie. He gives me the armor of the dragon, increases the life a little bit, and of course you go into a tunnel here, fight your way through another little 2D tunnel, come out the other side, find yourself to another town, and this town gives you the hint that you're going to need the wings of the Falcon in order to access or jump over the next little bridge here. And I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, maybe I already have the wings of the Falcon. I'm not sure. So I continue up and I get to the little bridge here. The guy even tells me before I go over there, is like, good luck, like, doubting my abilities a little bit. And of course I jump off the bridge and I try to glide and naturally I die. So of course I'm going to need the wings of the Falcon. Now, I talked to a few people and they say that the wings of the Falcon are hidden beneath or below the palace. And I'm like, which palace is that? Because evidently I hadn't seen a palace. I traveled all the way back to the very beginning of the game, and I was getting a little annoyed. I was like, why would they put the wings of the Falcon all the way back at the beginning? I get back to the beginning of the game, they're not over there either. So I have to journey all the way back, look at the hints again, and wouldn't you know it, the little palace that they're talking about is like 2 squares above where the town is. And I just completely missed it. I mean, that was completely my fault. The game was way more obvious than what I picked up on. You go to this little tree here, you talk to it or check on it, and of course you get the wings of the Falcon. And then you go back up to the little bridge here, and when you get to the bridge this time, I jump up and I try to glide all the way across, and I still miss it. And I'm like, what happened? And evidently you have to jump like right there at the very edge in order to make it all the way across. It's still a really close jump, and if you don't do it just right, you could still die from it. But once again, you get the wings of the Falcon, you fly across this bridge, you continue on your journey. And holy cow, the palace is an awesome level as far as like aesthetic goes, because of course you have the palace aesthetic in the front ground, you got little moss growing on it, you got the trees in the background, you got little traps as far as like you step on some of the little bricks here, they go down, little flames shoot up. I mean, there's a lot of little booby traps as far as that. You jump up onto the top of the castle, you have like little grass blowing in the wind effects actually blow you back. I mean, this is a great level as far as like creating an atmosphere to what it'd actually be like as far as like going back to a medieval castle, getting ready to fight through, all these demon hordes in order to conquer the castle. A great level as far as aesthetic goes. This is where you get the little snake dog from the cover of the box art. There's also where you get like one of the little gargoyle skeletons that's going to fight against you. You also get like a little black hole enemy, best I know how to describe it anyway. And the final boss for this palace, like, it is an awesome looking boss because it's like a mixture of a fish and a lion and a bee all at once, and probably a few other animals, and it's just such a cool aesthetic here. And of course he can divide himself up, and 4 little bees come out to try to attack you, and then of course he reappears and you have to attack him again. And so once again you're sort of maneuvering your way around the level here, trying to attack. But the sprite for this boss is just like all the rest of them. It's such a cool sprite, and they worked so hard to do a great design for what all these creatures are going to look like. Like I said, this is one of the best looking Game Boy games as far as like sprite design goes that I've come across. After we defeat that boss, we finally get to talk to King Darkon, and he tells us that we're going to need the Red Blaze in order to defeat the Destroyers and their king, King Breaker. Now, in order to find the Red Blaze, we have to talk to a guy named Baimon, who's going to tell us where Majoria is, and she's going to instruct us where the Red Blaze is. Now, the game is getting a little confusing here as far as like different names that are popping up, where we need to go. But if you want to condense it all down, we got to go to find Baimon, who's going to tell us where Majoria is, who's going to give us the Red Blaze in order to beat the game. That's as simple as we can make it here. So off we go to find Baimon. And as we're journeying through here, we end up finding Baimon to the southeast in a little town here. And he's actually hidden in a little cave, and you have to fight this little zombie or little demon in front of it. And once you defeat that demon, they give you extra health again, another armor. You go in there, and Baimon says that he had a candle that he needs, but he lost it somewhere out in the desert. And so, or not lost it, someone stole it from him, and they're hiding out in the desert. So now you gotta go out to the desert. And the desert has a nice little puzzle here as far as like, you gotta figure out when you're in the desert where to stand in order for it to sort of do an invisible pathway to lead you to this little hole in the middle of the desert. And it took me a while to figure it out. It was really just sort of random trial and error. And I eventually figured out where to stand, and it sort of shot me down into a little hole here. And when you're in the hole, obviously you go back to a 2D platform to start fighting for the candle. And this desert 2D level is once again really well designed. I love the background here where the little sand dunes have like little skulls in the background. I would just love to know like the entire lore of the Ghoul realm, because there's so much cool stuff built into these backgrounds. But regardless, you go through here, there's a bunch of free fall areas, and you sort of have to map out where you're going to fall to, and it does take a few tries. But if you stocked up on the Talisman of the Cyclones, you really shouldn't have too much trouble with that. And you eventually work your way all the way to the end of the little desert level here, and there's some different enemies as far as like little sand ghouls that I'm going to call them that sort of pop up and try to attack you. But you finally reach the last boss here, and once again, like I've said for all the other ones, this last boss, phenomenal. I mean, you got this like what I'm going to call a chariot skeleton here. He's got these 2 giant wheels on him, or maybe they're like snails on the side of him, like they're shells, and you can shoot these projectiles at you, and it's just such a awesome looking enemy. And once again, the mechanics are pretty much the same as all the other ones. You just sort of jump around the area and, you know, find yourself a little good spot to get multiple shots in, and then sort of glide your way around to another spot. Pretty simple as far as like mechanics go, but the design for them, man, you just can't get any better than the boss design in this game. Now after defeating him, you get the power of the claw, which allows you to have a little projectile you shoot out, where you can now basically grab onto the spikes on the side of the wall. And you also get the candle of darkness to take back to Baimon. Now when you take it back to Baimon, of course he opens up a little passage behind him, and now you can find Majoria. And you journey through a little maze here, and the maze is pretty easy to find. And when you get to the bottom of the maze, you have an opportunity to basically light the candle on this little pillar here, and Majoria is now going to appear. And I like the idea of something called a candle of darkness, because when you light it up, it turns the entire room dark. And I don't know, I just enjoy what potential lore is behind that. But it makes the whole room dark. Majoria appears, and you have to, of course, talk to her multiple times. And then before you can finally get the last talk to her, you have to go through a miniature boss battle here of like sort of miniature skeleton chariots. And after you defeat them, you're going to talk to Majoria one more time. Majoria is going to tell you that you actually have the Red Blaze inside you, and you need to go talk to a fellow named Rushafel, who's in the far west, I believe, and he's going to actually be able to give you the Eternal Flame, and from there you should be able to, on your final bit, to fight against King Breaker. And so once again, the game's going through the find so-and-so to get an item to go to somewhere else. But, I mean, it does allow the story to continue on and gives you a reason to travel from location to location. So off we go to find Rushafel. But Rushafel is not quite as obvious to find as some of the other ones, because there's basically all these caves that you can go into, and you have to explore all these caves to figure out which one is the correct cave, because he's only hiding in one of the caves. And it's actually, if you go off to the far east of this little screen here, and it's going to be the second cave from the top, is what I figured out. And so if you go into that one, that's going to be the easier one. So anyone playing the game, that's the right one to go into. And of course, this little corridor here is actually a pretty difficult one. You're going to basically have a lot of long free falls, and there'll be a lot of spikes along the edges here. It's pretty difficult to maneuver. In some areas, I just simply took the hits, because I was like, I can't time this right. I'm just going to take the hits and just do a quick free fall all the way down in order to progress through the level. There's a lot of parts where you have to fly for a really long time before you drop down, and your wing's not unlimited, and so you have to time that just right, and I usually ended up getting hit at least once on the spikes as well. I'm just thankful they weren't like instant death spikes like in Mega Man, and so that actually helped a lot. But this level here is probably the most difficult level we've come through in the game. But once again, if you stocked up on the Talisman of the Cyclones throughout the game by, using the vials that you get plentiful throughout the entire experience here, you should be very well equipped on as far as your extra lives go, and shouldn't be too big of a deal. But this is a more difficult level than all the ones leading up to it. And then you get to Rushafell, and Rushafell is a really cool looking boss here. I don't really know what to compare him as far as like, to something else, because he's not going to be like the normal skeleton army or giant mutant fish. He's a very haunting looking figure here, something you'd probably see like in like the Watchmen or like maybe like the DC universe. I mean, he's just awesome looking. And the whole goal here is you basically journey around a little circle here and you wait for an opportunity to shoot him in the head. And then of course he puts his hands back up and you have to journey back around a little circle here, wait for another opportunity, get several more shots on the head, and you continue journeying around a little circle here. I mean, it's not too hard of a boss fight, wasn't too hard to figure out that the head's the weak spot, but it's just a very cool haunting looking enemy. And once again, the aesthetics, excellent. Now after you defeat him, you do get a final weapon upgrade, which is a Dark Fire, which is a super powerful projectile you can shoot out, as well as getting basically unlimited wing power. You have the highest jump inside the entire game. I mean, you are like a super gargoyle at this point, and it's now your job with all these extra powers and the eternal candle or candle of eternity or a candle of eternal darkness, I don't know, candle of eternal something. Now you can finally go and fight against King Breaker, and it's going to be one final 2D level leading up to him. And this final 2D level is one of the best 2D levels in the entire game. It is very hard compared to a lot of the other ones. However, this particular 2D level, it allows for such a different strategy. With the unlimited wingspan, you can basically just glide through all these areas, and you have to, instead of trying to figure out like how long you're going to be able to glide, you're having to figure out how you're going to maneuver your glide higher and higher. And I really enjoy like the slower pace of this level because you can really take your time, figure out what direction you want to go, what strategy you want to use, and this is just a really excellent level that mixed the mechanics up more than I ever thought it would by having that unlimited wingspan. And it's a really fun level, a lot of spikes, a lot of potential to die, but it is one of the most fun levels in the entire game. Now when you get to King Breaker, he actually gives you two opportunities. You can agree to join him and become the ruler of planet Earth, or you can just choose to go against him and try to save the Ghoul Realm. And if you say you want to join him, he actually still calls you a traitor and makes you fight him anyway, but it takes like away all your powers, and so it seems like probably an impossible fight. I don't know if it is or not. But if you go back and say you will not join him, at that point you actually get to fight him with all your powers. And just like when you're fighting against Rushafell, you have to hit his head, but it's really hard to actually get an opportunity to hit his head. And I mean, I journeyed around the little area here multiple times trying to get it right, and finally, after dying several times, I just decided I'm just going to jump up there with the one opportunity I have, get right beside the head, and then just unload like every single projectile I got of the Dark Fire. And you'd be surprised how fast the boss fight was over just by that constant firepower, like right on the head in one swift blow. And so if you do that strategy, he's not too bad of a boss. But if you're trying to just sort of jump in opportunities here and there, the boss fight could take a pretty darn long time. But with my strategy, pretty quick. But just in general, I love when games like allow you to get like super powerful at the end of the game by having an unlimited wingspan, by having a super powerful weapon. I love games like when you finish the game, you are like 100 times more powerful than you were at the start of the game, and you just feel so good about your character when you finish the game. Now, of course, after you defeat him, you get to go back and talk to King Darkon here, and he tells you that once again you've defeated the King of Destruction. He's been sealed away. Who knows how long he'll stay sealed away this time. And King Darkon actually gives you the planet Earth to have rule over, which I guess is sort of like a prequel to Ghosts and Goblins, maybe. So I'm not sure if you were pulled away from the world of Ghosts and Goblins to come to this world, or maybe after this game you're going to the world of Ghosts and Goblins, but I like to believe that Ghosts and Goblins is connected at least on one of the two ends of the game. But regardless, at this point, the credits begin to roll, and just like in the Mega Man Game Boy games, it shows you all the core enemies that you fought against, or like bosses-wise, and you get a really good look at a lot of the sprites without having to fight against them, which I found pretty rewarding because, like I said, the enemy design in this game, phenomenal. I loved it. And of course, afterwards, it thanks you for playing, has a little Capcom, or presented by Capcom, and overall, this is a phenomenal game. I mean, I've played Ghosts and Goblins, which I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I like the game, but I'm just so horrible at it. I played Gargoyles Quest 2 on NES, but I've not played that since probably like maybe like 1999, year 2000, somewhere around there. So it's been a solid 20-something years since I played it. I remember loving the game, and my memory of that game and my experience of this game, they are equal. They are both excellent games as far as Gargoyles Quest could go. But everything about this game is just top notch. The movement in the game, the handling in the game, the swapping between the overworld, the 2D action, the music in the game, the boss design in this game, your power-ups in the game, getting more powerful as you go. This game does pretty much everything that I want in a game. And so to me, Gargoyles Quest is a top-notch S-tier game if I've ever seen one on the Game Boy. And if you haven't had an opportunity to play it yet, I strongly recommend you giving Gargoyles Quest a try. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any Game Boy or Game Boy Color games you want me to cover closer to sooner than later. And as always, go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.